Do you think that you could pass an interview if it was conducted by an AI? Interviews used to mean walking into an office, shaking hands, smiling at people, but now some are finding that they're interviewed on video by a machine before they even meet a hiring manager. Welcome back to the Work It podcast. My name is Nat, and as always, I am joined by my co host Gerald. For so many people, interviews felt deeply human. There's body language, personality, even the way that you tell a story during an interview. All of these are judged. So, how can a machine judge all of that? And when you're speaking to a screen instead of a person, how do you still bring your best self to the table? Today, Gerald, we're talking about how AI is changing hiring processes for both employers and job seekers. And we want to find out, how does an AI interview actually work? And what can job seekers do to stand out? So with us today to break down all of this is Prashanth Sundaram. He's the country head for Singapore at X0PA, an AI-powered platform that streamlines hiring for companies like DSTA and Fair Price Group. Welcome to the show, Prash.
Hi guys, thank you for having me.
Welcome.
Yeah, so maybe let's start off with a little bit of a breakdown. How does an AI interview actually work?
The AI interviews are on a spectrum. You have certain candidates dishing out their responses to a video or to a static question. You have candidates dishing out responses to a humanoid that's actually talking to them in video and audio fashion as well.
A humanoid, so you can't see an avatar of a hiring manager.
You can see a video of a hiring manager, you can see an avatar of a hiring manager,
Okay.
all of that, and then the responses can be analyzed by an AI as well. So it can be 100% AI driven, or it can be AI evaluated, but the questions and all of that are still human driven.
But would the AI be able to assess background, like if I'm taking the interview maybe in my messy bedroom or at a study room, like would it be able to see all of this? Would it be able to see that I'm wearing a nice shirt versus like a, I don't know, my army t-shirt or something?
Generally, it's more content focused,
Okay.
but there are video analytics where we are able to look at facial expressions, body language,
Wow.
tone of speaking, pace of speaking, type of words used, and so on. The background ancillaries are generally secondary in nature.
So how would it kind of read into the body language thing that you were mentioning? Like, does it look at whether I'm spinning in my chair?
Absolutely. I think the way you speak, the confidence level, any form of stammering, the type of words that you use, are you looking into the camera, how your face and body gestures are actually moving in sync or out of sync in terms of what you're actually saying. So there's a whole bunch of video analytics that can be done on the candidate.
So if you were to take an AI interview tomorrow, like, let's not tell Zopa, but if you were job seeking tomorrow, going
Yep.
for an AI interview, would you be able to ace it?
I think to me, the difference between an AI interview and a human interview is very little.
Okay.
At the end of the day, they're seeking to validate competencies. They're seeking to do like a first cut. That's generally how the employers are using the AI interviews. So I would do it almost exactly the same way I would do it with an in-person. Of course, there is no firm handshake. There is no sit down. There is no sipping on my glass of water in between and all of that. But yes, I would run it the same way. The kind of research, the kind of articulation would be rather similar.
So Sopa has been running this AI interview platform for a number of years now.
Yes.
Has it been long enough that you can kind of tell what the most common mistakes these candidates are making when coming face to face with an AI?
Absolutely. I think the level of preparedness, the technical understanding of how the AI interview works, sharing some common pitfalls, not looking into the camera. I think that's a very common thing. When you speak with a human, you make eye contact. There is a certain level of
There's something to
relationship.
look at, right?
There's something
Yeah.
to look at. The level of preparedness, I think this is something that we see quite common. The amount of research that a candidate does for an in-person interview generally tends to be far superior than an AI interview. So making sure that the candidate is well prepared for that AI interview also sets themselves up for success, rather than thinking, oh, this is just part of the process, let me just wing it and then I hopefully will land with an in-person interview. No, a lot of employers are using the AI interviews to filter, to understand which candidates are truly worth 30 to 45 minutes of their time, and then be invited for an in-person or an online interview.
The process works for people who are perhaps more confident and more prepared. They have better, maybe even better self-esteem. They are just basically more comfortable speaking about themselves towards a camera and to a AI robot, right, avatar. But I'm just wondering whether does the system also take care of people who maybe don't have that kind of levels of confidence, or maybe they don't even have, let's say, the proper equipment to put themselves in the best color tone.
Yeah, because it's
Yeah.
identifying like your vocal
Yeah.
like tics or
Yes.
like your vocal tendency. So is it also looking at whether my laptop's microphone is good or
No, I think there are two parts to that. One, there is the whole technical setup that generally candidates go through before commencing the AI interview. So they are able to do a lot of practice. They're able to ensure their mic is audible. They're able to do test recordings, make sure they are speaking in a clear fashion, lighting, background, as you mentioned before, all of that. The second part of it is that's why many a times there is a human in the loop. So the AI helps to provide an evaluation and take a stab at some of the core competencies required for the role, but then the human still makes an informed decision on whether to shortlist or reject the candidate. So from a process standpoint, if there are 100 applications and 20 of them are going through an AI interview, the humans could be in the loop and take a stab at these 20 and identify which top 5 to then move to an online or an on-site interview.
As a career coach, when we train people for interview practice, sometimes we do it like, as a role play.
Yep.
There are sometimes that we are asking people to record themselves now, right? And then after send it over, and then we have a review of this. So that's also a form of practice as well. So I'm glad that the system, has such features to allow someone to practice. So I think it's really, really important because we wouldn't want people to miss out just because they're not comfortable.
Absolutely.
So
They
it's
need to get
important to level the playing field a little bit.
Absolutely. They need to be familiarized and acclimatized with the platform before they actually begin the assessment. And that's something that we take pride in our assessment platforms, where candidates are able to really understand where to click the buttons, where's the timer, how many takes do I have, for example. And then once they're fully comfortable and ready, then they hit start and then they commence the interview.
Because you did mention that one of the most common mistakes is that people don't show up as prepared to an AI interview, right? So, how differently should I be preparing for an AI interview if I was going to one, let's say, tomorrow?
Taking a page out of actors and actresses, where the common advice to them is look in the mirror when you're performing, when you're practicing, basically, and then be a critique of yourself so that you can ensure you then get better, you kind of hone it. Exact piece of advice for AI interviews. Look into the camera, do recordings, rewatch your recordings, make sure you're able to speak in a cohesive fashion. Use AI to identify potentially what sort of questions the AI interview is asking. Is it rudimentary? Is it more communicative in nature? Is it competency based? Is it technical? If it's a technical role, do that extra homework just like how you would do research on an interviewer before you go for an in-person, and that would set them up for acing, hopefully smashing the AI interview.
So typically for the recruiters who set up the system for the AI screening, do they tell the candidates what kind of questions they'll be asked, or is it like a random mixed bag that is hidden, like exam questions that you don't know about?
Yeah. Depends on the employers. They do have a choice. Some of them do share a bit of a prelude in terms of what to expect. How many questions, type of questions, is it video, is it essay, is it MCQ? Some would even say the questions have no right, no wrong answers, situational judgment questions, competency questions. They're trying to evaluate the candidate's thought process, so just be yourself. So it can be a mixed bag. Some of them prefer to do it in the form of an exam and a true surprise to see how candidates respond to stress and pressure because the job involves as such. So it could be either or.
So the questions, I guess, also differ at the different stages of the interview. If it's in the earlier stage, then maybe you get more basic questions like you just mentioned earlier. Then maybe as you go along, if it's still virtual screening or virtual interview is still the way to go, then maybe they ask more technical questions.
Yeah, it could be. Generally, it's a mixed bag. They want to assess the candidate holistically before bringing them down. I've never really seen an organization that does more than one round of AI interview because that causes a lot of friction for the candidate. So there's a pre-screening based off their resume or the application. There is then a round of AI interview, which is a test drive before the actual in-person or online. And that test drive is generally rather holistic. So it's competency-based, soft skill, just finding about themselves as a person, some technical as well if the role is technical in nature. So generally a mixed bag. 3 to 5 questions is the general advice that we give employers to set so that it's not too taxing for the candidates. And then if they clear that, then they move on to the in-person or the online.
I see.
Right. So most commonly among your clients who do use the AI platform to assess candidates, what are the parameters or the common parameters that they kind of input into this AI to assess based on how job seekers perform in that interview?
Generally, I would break it down into two different verticals. You have the technical side of the house and then the non technical side of the house, and it would depend for what sort of role the candidate is interviewing for. For the technical side, they're assessing technical competencies, cloud architecture, project management, front end, back end developers, software engineers. They are evaluating the technical competency and know how of the hard skills and tech skills required for that particular role. On the flip side, you have the non-tech, your salespeople, your post-sales, your partnership, client relationship managers, and so on. It's more soft skill focused there in terms of motivation, stakeholder management, communication. Are they able to articulate in a cohesive manner? If yes, then they're able to likely present in front of a bunch of CXOs. So it generally is broken down into technical and non-technical, depending on the nature of the role.
Right. One thing I was interested in is because, like I mentioned up top, one of the companies that uses your services is Fair Price Group, right? And I wonder, is it just the white collar employees of Fair Price that go through this interview, or is it inclusive of the blue collar side of the company?
It's entirely both. White collars and blue collars use our system for Fair Price Group. And depending on the type of role within the blue collar and white collar, they may be using certain elements of, be it AI interviews, be it pre screening, other parts of the talent acquisition process like offer letter, interview scheduling, and so on. But yes, both white collars and blue collars do use the AI interview features.
Oh, that's very interesting because I wonder what would the questions be for a blue collar worker, right?
It may just be stakeholder management, communication. For example, a cashier will be expected to communicate in a cohesive fashion, some level of mathematics, calculating the change, general customer service etiquette.
I'm wondering on the flip side, right? How does all this input gets computed into some form of a recommendation? Could you walk us through from the hiring manager, what do they see from their end?
Generally, the hiring managers are looking at one of two things. They're either looking at the raw footage or the raw summary that we have generated of the AI interview, and they take a stab at that. They make a decision within 1 to 2 minutes. So it's as good as them watching the video themselves and then identifying some conclusions, parallels to what they would otherwise do in an in-person interview, and move them forward. Second, there are a bunch of AI parameters, like we shared earlier, motivation, communication, or some on the tech side, and the platform is able to provide a score in terms of a high, medium, low, or even a quantifiable score, and that score then translates into a rubric. There's an overall percentage score for the assessment, there's a cutoff, and then based on that cutoff, candidates are shortlisted. So it can be completely automated, or it can be completely human, or it can be a human in the loop as well, where the AI scores all of the candidates, the human stack ranks them, identifies which top 20 should make it through, and then they are manually shortlisted or rejected.
Wow. So would the person ever know their score?
Generally not. Some employers do encourage a feedback loop, and they do want to share the feedback on performance, on some of the scores and insights. That naturally helps job seekers to identify where their shortcomings are, where they can improve.
Wow.
But I think there's a very small percentage of them that do that.
I really hope that that can be rolled out, because that would be so useful. One of the most common things we hear from people going through interviews is like a black hole.
Yep.
They don't know, they met someone or they've gone through some form of screening, but they don't know how they perform. And most of the time, even someone replies to them is a politically correct answer.
Yeah.
You know,
I kind of picture it like karaoke. Like at the end of the interview, there's a dun dun dun, and then there's like 90 over 100 or something like that.
If there's a system that can give you the real objective feedback, that would be AI. And if you're not happy, you just blame the AI lah.
Yeah.
Right? You can't blame a person, right? But at least AI is trained to say what's objectively happening.
Absolutely.
So I thought that, wow, that could be really, really good if the feedback can go back to the person, and if repeatedly the same feedback is there, then at some point the job seeker will learn that there is a gap.
Absolutely.
And they have to improve that gap.
That's exactly what we do with the IHLs that we work with in Singapore, where they use these AI interview platforms to let their students have a form of experiential learning, where tomorrow if they go into the real world, and many employers are using these platforms today, they get to practice, they get to get the feedback. The feedback can come from career coaches or career services, or they could come from the platform in the form of AI. And then they learn, they hone, they retake, they practice. So eventually when they graduate, when they're going for an internship or a fresh grad role, they at least are familiar, they know what to do, what not to do.
Okay. So at this point in time, because I understand it's still pretty early days for AI interviews, when you're speaking to these companies who are trying to understand the capabilities of the platform, what kind of limitations do you warn them about first to make sure that they're not misusing the service and maybe missing out on some great candidates?
For senior management roles, for director, VP level roles and above, you wouldn't want to put an AI in front of them. I'm sure a candidate that senior would not want to speak with an AI as well. They'd want to speak with a human. So some drawbacks would definitely be for non-voluminous roles, senior level roles. You can't really replicate a few things that are there in an in-person interview, like a firm handshake, looking into the eyes, gestures, sitting down, having a conversation, building a relationship outside of the standard interview template. I think these are some of the shortfalls that no AI, no matter how good, will be able to overcome.
So it's very important still to have that human intervention in the mix.
So those recruiters who are serving the C-suite executive search firms, I think one of the big things that they pride themselves on is on the relationship and being able to scout the right person
Absolutely.
for a very senior job role. So I think it makes sense. AI can do some part of it, but I think what Prash is also saying is, are you mindful of the candidate's own thoughts about the process? Like if you're coming in for a top job and you're being screened by a system, I don't know. Although every human would prefer to be screened by a human being, right?
Yeah.
But so I guess someone for senior, it might, I don't know, it affects the way they perceive the company.
When I go for interviews, I kind of have a crutch in which, I am unabashedly a very likable person. And so when I go into a room, I feel like I can shake everyone's hand. I make an impression.
Yep.
I can maybe crack the occasional joke. Maybe sometimes it's too much. Some of the jobs that I've been rejected from would probably say that. But is AI able to have the same human intuition as an employer who is a human assessing a human candidate, in the fact of like, maybe this person would be a joy to work with, or this maybe despite their skills, many skills, they're also a great personality hire.
Like a vibe check.
Yeah.
The vibe check, the feel truly comes from seeing and meeting someone in terms of how they're speaking, how they're gelling with the kind of questions you're asking. So there is a certain element that definitely AI cannot replicate.
Right.
But once again, not every candidate can make it to that stage to woo them over with their charisma, with the way they speak, their smile, and all of that, right? So it's about cracking through to that stage, and I think the AI interview potentially serves as a pedestal for candidates to express themselves and get to that stage.
Now, we know that recruiters aren't the only ones starting to use AI in this interaction of the interview, right? A lot of candidates have historically used AI to prepare for interviews, to maybe even rehearse their interviews, right? So with how we're seeing the voice activated AI softwares in the market that generate live answers, allowing these candidates to actually read off of almost a teleprompter, does that make AI a little bit more susceptible to such hacks?
50-50 is generally a tug of war. AI is being used by recruiters to make their life easy. As you rightly pointed out, AI is also being used by candidates to potentially hack the system or game the system. Generally, from statistics, what we have seen from employers, it's the 80-20 rule. 80% of candidates are doing it with good intentions. They are truly practicing. They're using AI, definitely not, but they're using it not to game the system or teleprompting or reading off, but more to do their homework, their research, understand the role, the organization, the type of questions, and then deliver. You, of course, have your 5% that would try to game the system using teleprompters. There are proctoring solutions in place to do anti-cheat to prevent such gamification of the platforms. So it can easily identify and detect if a candidate is using AI, reading off a script, tracking eye movement, and things like that. I would highly advise candidates against using AI to game it. Use AI to your advantage. Do research. Come in well prepared, but don't try to game the system. More likely than not, the system can identify it, or even if they don't, and the human ends up identifying it when they look at the responses, you never know, you may be blacklisted. The word goes around in the market. You don't wanna do that.
Clearly this is a thing that a lot of companies are starting to implement. And so suffice to say, a lot of job seekers in the market, perhaps even students that are nearing graduation, they could be faced with a job market in which most of them are assessing them with AI, right? So when it comes to this near future, what kind of capabilities can we see improve on the technological front that we as job seekers, we as workers should be worried about or should be preparing for?
Absolutely, that's a fantastic question. I think it's the whole journey of acclimatizing and getting used to that this is the future. For example, if you call a customer service agent today or do a phone banking, it's very unlikely that you are met with a live agent immediately, right? Many of these service providers today, be it your ISPs or your banks, they have an automated agent to begin with, and that's kind of becoming the norm. At some point in the future, that may become the norm for recruitment as well. We are building our own end-to-end agentic AI solutions, and we have our own agents as well. So you could very well talk to an agent first that's basically doing the pre-screening, the AI interview, and then eventually you may meet a human when you potentially fit the bill, meet some of the criterias and all of that. So that could be very well the near future, and that's one thing that I would tell students, job seekers to embrace it. Take advantage of it, use similar AI and LLMs to understand, do the research, be prepared, identify on the type of questions, and kind of practice and hone themselves on that.
Right. But I do wonder whether, introducing this additional layer of having an AI video interview, does it just lengthen the interview and application process for job seekers?
No, I wouldn't think so. I, in fact, think it reduces friction. In fact, another use of AI is CV parsing.
Okay.
So, unlike the olden days with legacy systems where you upload your resume and then you still fill in like 8-9 pages of application form with your details, the AI is able to parse a candidate's resume and fill out maybe 80-90% of the information, and all they have to do is vet, validate, amend some of the info. So that in fact reduces friction from the candidate experience. Second, depending on whether recruiters and employers are automating this process, where if it's a fresh graduate role or an internship role, they're automatically invited to the AI interview rounds, then it actually quickens the process for candidates, because I could submit an application tonight, automatically be invited for an AI interview tonight, and if I'm feeling up for it, I may do it immediately, or I may do it the next day, as opposed to previously I would submit my resume, I'd have to wait for a recruiter to look at it. And generally the AI interview kind of pseudo replaces the phone screen that recruiters used to do, so they would rather wait for the recruiter to then pick up the phone, give them a call. So it saves time on their end, it makes the experience frictionless for the candidate as well.
So if let's say that happens, you submit your application and then after that you receive an email for the video screening interview, should you do it immediately so that you don't miss out? Or if you take time to practice and then you wait a little few days, you feel until you feel good about yourself, then you go for an interview, would you miss out?
That truly depends. Some of these video screens have a time limit to it, 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. So firstly, take note if there is a time limit and when you should do it by. Second, even if there's no time limit, that doesn't mean you take your own sweet time. Try to get it done ASAP. Don't feel pressured to do it immediately if you don't feel 100% confident about the role. So that whole point earlier on practice makes perfect, using AI to do the research and homework, I would highly encourage that someone does their research, checking what sort of questions potentially are asked, what is this role about. Generally, job seekers do a spray and pray, right? They probably apply for 50 different roles. And then when they get invited for an interview for one, I think the first thing they need to do is go back and look at the JD and be like, hang on a second, which role did I apply for? So get familiarized, understand the company, do that research, and then go ahead and do the video screen or the AI interview.
I was asking a question because many times job seekers, they ask that question about like how soon must I do that interview, because they're afraid of losing out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't know whether the system has a feature where it waits for a certain amount of candidates to respond, or it only submits and evaluates all the screening once the deadline is passed. Then that would be more fair, right?
Yeah.
Right. But I don't know whether that's the way the system is built.
Generally not. From a recruiter standpoint, time to hire is the most critical metric that they're trying to preserve. That's their main success metric. So time is of the utmost essence. So whenever candidates complete the assessment, the evaluation is done immediately.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Having said that, don't kanchong. as a job seeker, make sure you are truly confident, truly prepared before you do the interview. So take that time out. There more likely than not, there will be a expiration date or window or period of time put within the email by when you should complete the interview. So take some time, 12 hours, 24 hours, practice, and then go ahead and do the interview.
Now, I can kind of foresee that in the comment section for this episode, we're going to have a bunch of people saying things like, if I'm going to take time out of my day to go for this interview, I want the hiring manager to take time out of their day to assess me and to answer my questions.
Yep.
So what would you say to these people who feel like there is a power imbalance here, where it's not as if they can interview the AI back and ask about nuances in the company, nuances of the role, to understand whether they want the job in the first place.
And I share this with all the candidates I interview at my organization, right? As much as I'm evaluating the candidate in terms of whether they're the best fit of the role, I strongly believe the candidate is also evaluating the organization and the role. Is this the kind of culture, people that I do want to work with? So I feel it's a two-way street. If a candidate does feel that do not want to speak for an AI, then fair enough. I think they have all the right to not do the interview. Hence, even when they apply for a job, you always have a withdraw your application button where after that, if they have second thoughts, they can always go ahead and withdraw. Having said that, for roles with massive impact, your senior executive, your roles with large visibility within the organizations, I think it's fair enough to assume some form of power balance and expect them to set time aside to give you that floor and opportunity to hear you out. But if you're coming in at an entry level without much years of experience and you're just trying to learn the ropes, I think it's inevitable that you're going to be hit with an AI interview because these are the very roles that have voluminous amount of applications. All of the hundreds and hundreds of graduates from our local top unis are trying to apply into the very same roles within very same limited roles within these organizations. So they have to wrap their head around that. If they are faced with an AI, then embrace it, do your best, and then be hope to be given the opportunity to then meet in person. If not, walk away from it and try to find an employer that would not use an AI, but it may be rather unlikely for voluminous roles.
Right. Okay. Now, because AI is grading based on a lot of metrics that are set by hiring managers, who, the next time they interface with the results of those metrics that they're inputting is when they receive a bunch of AI summaries and a bunch of recordings of the interviews that take place. Is there kind of a potential for the AI to be a little bit discriminatory in this sense, where it is assessing people based on a bunch of things that perhaps they might not be so comfortable with? I'm just
Correct.
thinking,
No control over.
yeah, I'm just thinking
Yeah.
of someone who maybe is not the most tech savvy, but they're applying for a job in which, they are perfectly qualified for that role. Would they be penalized by the AI for being uncomfortable looking into a camera, uncomfortable with speaking to not a human, essentially?
Generally not. I think the biases creep in more with humans. The
Okay.
AI is generally objective, at least the AI that we use. So a human may perceive the interviewee based on the color of shirt they're wearing, the way they dress themselves, the way they may not be tech savvy, and so on and so forth. The AI is largely focused on the content of what they're delivering, and that's largely the essence of how they're evaluated. So there's usually less, in fact, no bias with the AI, even when it comes to CV screening or video interviews, as opposed to a human. Because even a human, when they look at the resume, they may be identifying things like GPAs, where they've come from, and so on, and they may have an affinity towards them. But the AI actually removes all of this PII and is solely looking at experience, education, qualifications, whether they have the right certifications for the role, skill sets, and so on and so forth.
Prash, we cannot be blind to the fact that, in recent weeks, we have seen people at graduation ceremonies giving speeches about AI getting booed by the graduating audience. So for those who feel maybe a little bit intimidated, discouraged, or feel like this is becoming an unfair situation because I'm graded by a machine, how would you speak to these people if they were entering the market today?
I think the whole of Singapore is pushing on AI adoption, not just in recruitment, but across different verticals and all fronts for that matter. I think it's imperative that they will be faced with AI. It's just about their mindset and their perspective. They ought to embrace it. They ought to be prepared for it. They ought to identify how they can perform with the AI, and I think that's really the way to go. Rather than being hesitant about it or being defensive about it, that's really not going to get them anywhere. If their goal is to eventually land that first full-time role and AI is in their way, I would advise to figure a way through it rather than going around.
Gerald, I don't know if I eventually go for another interview and I'm graded by an AI, whether I will ace that interview as much, but I'm definitely a lot less anxious about it now.
Yeah, for sure. I think Prash should give us really, really good information about how it works, about how it also protects the candidates, how it also guides the recruiter to do better in terms of their screening. So I think the system is here to stay. That's the way I see it, and I think it's for us to learn how to utilize it and also maximize it for our own benefit. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that our viewers, our listeners actually do learn a lot from our conversation, because I've definitely learned a lot, right,
Same here.
Gerald?
Same here.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
Hey everyone, it's the Ask Work It segment of the podcast. If you have a problem that you're struggling with in the workplace, why not write to us? We're at cnapodcast@mediacorp.com.sg, and maybe we can help you solve your problem. Gerald, today's question comes from a listener by the name of Jay. Now, Jay is working in an SME that's facing manpower shortages and a high turnover rate. As a more experienced employee, she is often given many tasks outside of her job scope and feels like she has to report to multiple bosses with conflicting expectations. Her direct manager expects her core work to be completed on time, believing that the additional responsibilities do not take up much time. We've all had a manager like that. On the other hand, her other managers from other departments expect her to prioritize additional tasks as well, treating her as part of their team.
Wow, everyone wants a piece of her.
Yeah, Jay is a popular person in the workplace, clearly. So being experienced used to feel like an advantage, but now it feels more like a burden. It's to the point where she's thinking about quitting.
Oh no.
Yeah, but in this current job market, she's also worried that this might not be the best time to
Yes.
be leaving her current position. So she's asking, how could she potentially handle multiple managers with no clear alignment on priorities and expectations?
Oh, this is a very difficult situation for her, especially being in the SME. I'm not sure how big the SME is, but the typical understanding or assumption that I'm having is that it's smaller with very little resources, and sometimes you have to do everything,
Yeah.
right? But this time she had to do everything plus with multiple bosses.
Yes.
Can you imagine how difficult it is? Have you been in this situation before?
I have, yeah. And it's not a pretty sight because I wanted to grow my career. So there was a little bit of that soft push from within, right? That I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything right. But it came to a point where it just burnt me out. It just was affecting every single one of the work that I was doing, and all of my managers were looking at me like, "What's wrong? You used to be so good at this. I don't understand why you're not performing."
I think the hard part here is what you mentioned earlier, that inner drive that makes you want to meet those expectations, and you kind of know you can do it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you think to yourself that it's okay to push, it's okay to excel, being hardworking, being determined. It's a good thing. It's a really, really good trait, and many employers would love to have that. But somehow there must be this boundary that we must know for ourselves, lah. Yeah. So when do you know that you reach a boundary?
When I broke down crying to my
Oh,
boss,
no.
my main boss, and I said like I really can't do this, and I quit.
You-
That
you-
was when I
You had multiple bosses also at that
yeah, I
point.
had multiple people I was reporting to.
Which boss do you cry to then?
The main one, the one that was telling me like, oh, you know what, it used to be 150%, now you're like 100%. I don't understand what's wrong. So that boss aside, I remember when I was going through this experience, I would oftenly joke about it being the curse of the competent, because this would have never happened to me if I was not as good at my core job function, right? It's because other managers, or maybe my main manager, will see that I'm excelling in this role. They perhaps, with altruistic intentions, wanted to help me grow in my career, and so they assigned more things on top of it to me. Encouraged me to take on new responsibilities, expand my scope of work, but never installed guardrails to make sure that I don't break down and they lose an supposedly good
Yeah.
talent.
If you don't do that with guardrails, it's like throwing you in the deep end of the pool.
Yeah.
And then you either sink or swim, and it can be quite dangerous, because if you really think about it, just taking on and taking on without knowing where the boundaries are, without proper guidance and support from your supervisor/supervisors, it can really derail your career actually at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, it really is core to the problem that her environment does not support her seeking her one core job function, right? Because in this case, they are going through a tough period. Manpower shortages, high turnover rates. So the managers across the business where Jay is at are just looking to the one stable person that they can kind of rely on, right?
Yes.
But if this goes on, Jay might not turn out to be the best support,
Yes.
or she might eventually cave.
Sometimes when we are so busy with our day-to-day operations, when there's a problem, we just patch over that problem and we don't solve it properly, because not because we don't want to, but it's because we cannot.
Right.
We would rather use the only resource we have to keep going rather than to take a pause, stock take, and realign, rearrange things to make it more efficient for longer term gains. So this is something that many companies, they don't really understand. They're not willing to do so because the day-to-day KPIs is more important. So, in your case, when you kind of had that breakdown moment with your main supervisor, I think that's probably quite a good thing that happened, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, in hindsight, everything turned out fine.
Yeah,
But for Jay, I'm sure we don't want her to reach that point,
definitely.
right?
Yes.
So what can she do as a
Mm.
first step to kind of make sure she doesn't end up like me?
Jay really needs to know her boundaries, and how close is she to her boundaries?
Mm.
Has she set those boundaries for herself, and has she actually crossed those boundaries already? Because we don't really know from her write in, right?
Yeah.
If she has already crossed those boundaries, then there's some urgency that she should probably reach out to the main supervisor, perhaps, to have that conversation about like where she's at right now
Mm.
and how unsustainable it is getting for her. For someone who's experienced and knowledgeable like her, we want to kind of preserve her and keep her going for as long as possible. And if I'm her supervisor, her coming to me this way, I will find ways to keep her and to help her along the way,
Right.
right? And whether that means to speak to the other supervisors, get their buy-in, and how do we work collectively to make sure that Jay as a employee continues to produce her best and is being taken care of at the same time.
So what you're saying is she's got to find the person who makes the decisions at the company she's at to ensure that she doesn't burn out and explain to them that she is tired, she is overworked,
Yes.
perhaps, maybe underpaid,
Yes.
and seek a solution.
Yes, and this is a really important step because that I know it sounds logical for many of us to do, right? But in reality, it's very hard
Yeah.
because it's an honest reflection of saying that I can't, I'm not able to. I have a limitation.
Yeah.
Some people might worry about, would this set me back in any way? Some people might worry about how it makes them, how are they perceived in the company.
Yeah.
So that's why there's this internal struggle. Like I should just keep going, and that's the danger part, lah.
Yeah, so I was about to ask, like, realistically, how likely is it that her manager will look at her with a different lens and potentially a negative one?
I think it really depends on their existing relationship. Honestly, I've come across situations where managers they are not so involved and they're not sympathetic, and that's the reason why the things has become the way it is. Right, it has regressed to a very bad state already, and I've seen cases where people just quit and leave because it's for their own sanity.
Which Jay is considering.
Yeah, correct. But like you said, in this job market, it's really very hard, right? So I think the important thing is how do you get the buy-in from your supervisor about this, right? I've also seen situations where the supervisor says, they are supportive, but they're not willing to coordinate with the other line managers because everybody views their own work as important.
And
right?
maybe they're all in the same rank, so they
Yes.
don't really have pull in that sense.
Yes, that's right. So I've seen cases where people would have to go and secure their own buy-ins with engaging all of the line managers to tell them what they need to do. But usually that's also pretty tough because it's on that person to broker all these agreements, and really everybody is not willing to let go of this one resource that they have. You see, I've seen cases where they go to the bigger manager to say that this is not tenable anymore. Sometimes that works because if let's say the company is really aware of her value and they want to keep her, then something must be done lah. Yeah. But it all boils down to how the culture in the company and how such things are being managed or being perceived, you see. I always remember this one saying that from my friend when I was really very young, and this person said this to me, nobody can pay you enough for you to like give your whole life to the job, because at the end of the day, if you die on the job, what they will send is just a fruit basket or a wreath,
That's pretty
That's
morbid.
it. If you are not well because of your job, you just get a fruit basket from the company and maybe a visit from your colleagues. If you die on your job, then you just get a flower wreath. That's the only thing they can do. So you got to really think about sustaining yourself, preserving yourself, so that you can not skive but go and do better. Jay, another thing that Jay can try to do is, if today she has bandwidth, right, she might want to initiate maybe certain ways of drawing more efficiencies from her work. Seeing whether some areas of automation or outsourcing can be done, so that they can be more efficient lah. She can devote her time to more of the critical things that needs her, and the not so critical things can be shelved to other people.
Right. So let's kind of game this for Jay, because understandably the hardest part of what she has to do next is how she frames her answers to her main boss, right? Let's call him that. So if she were to bring this up to her boss and they were to say, you know what, how about I just pay you more? What should she say then if she is clear, like, I don't want to do all of this work to all of these different managers, and they offer her additional compensation?
Yeah, I think if money is not the issue, right, then she might want to counter propose that what about using the money to have someone else do it? Maybe pay someone, scope out the job task itself to be fitting for that budget, the additional money, and then find somebody else within the company or maybe someone new to do that part of the work.
So what if the answer or the reply she gets from her boss is, I understand. How about you talk to those managers and tell them that I said prioritize this?
Okay.
So, I don't have to be the bearer of bad news to them. I want to retain my relationship with them, but you go and tell them that actually you would rather just focus on my work.
Yeah, I think in those situations, it's really important to be objective. And what I mean by objective is Jane would really need to scope out her work very clearly, outlining which are the critical ones that she has to follow through with and which are the not so critical ones that other people can do. Right? Then use that as a business case with the budget in to convince, to share with the other stakeholders, the other supervisors that, look, if today I'm continuing in this job role doing these things for you, I may not be able to devote myself as much because there are other things that are more critical.
Yeah.
Right? You can't say everything's critical. And then after that, you give them a solution. You tell them that, Big Boss has provided a budget. What do you think if we use this budget to hire someone to do these things so that this person is able to fully support you?
Well, clearly you're in a tough situation, Jay. Hopefully our discussion here today has some use for you. Hopefully you can take some of what we talked about away and, all the best in your conversation with your manager, or if you decide to leave, all the best in the market. But if everybody else listening and watching has a question for me and Gerald and you don't have anyone else to turn to, just write to us. We're at cnapodcast@mediacorp.com.sg, or you can comment wherever you're listening from as well.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Nat. Remember, being dependable at work is valuable, but carrying everyone's priorities alone is not sustainable.